Hello, class. This week we will be diving into outlining speeches. If you've looked ahead, you can kind of see that next week you'll be presenting your informative speeches. If you're nervous about that, please be feel to reach out to me, your instructor. I'm Instructor Ashley Page. I'm really happy to help you all. This week, to really help us get ready for those speeches, we're going to finally put everything together. You'll take everything we've learned about from starting speeches strong to how to do, eye contact, little things like that, the communication process. We're going to put it together in outlining your speech itself. Now, before you start on that, because that is your assignment this week, is to outline your speech with those sources, is to, of course, compare the speech versus the essay. Now, this is a good kind of first look at for how it explains for your discussion this week. Your discussion will really focus on this because there is a big difference between writing your speeches and writing essays. If you're taking English and things they've covered there, you can tell that there's going to be quite a few differences. Now, these are just a few of them. Feel free to expand on this and give me some tips or examples in the discussion to try to help understand this topic. The first that's really important to remember is that with your speeches, they are only heard once. That's why things need to be more clear, with the communication process that we talked about in week 1 or 2, can't remember. We talked about how we have our message. We want to make sure that those who are receiving the message are understanding it in the way we want them to. That's called effective communication. And that's why in speech, it's really important that the words you use are clear. You're not trying to give too much detail. You're trying to keep it brief. Because in English, when you write a paper, it's able to be read over and over. And that's why you can see in newspapers, the stories are longer and they give you more details versus, a news broadcast, they're very short, quick stories because it's only heard once. They want to write it in a way that you'll remember it. Another way it is different is your speeches should be very brief. They should contain, short sentences. The longer they are, the more your audience can drift off. It's really good to be very clear and very brief in a speech versus an essay to help keep your audience's attention span. Then it's also important in essays, you want to give more complex. You want to give, perfect grammar. You want it to be, more eloquent and put together. But with your speeches, you do not have to have perfect grammar. You don't have to have these beautiful sentences. The goal of the speech is that your audience is able to connect with your topic, that they're able to understand it. That's why when you give your speeches, don't really worry about, perfect grammar and things like that. That doesn't matter quite as much. I mean, obviously, if you're talking a speech about grammar, you're going to want to try to do that, but that's an example. Another one is your speech. It can be helpful to be repetitive because things are heard once. If you say it over and over or, summarize as you go, that really helps with understanding and able to see the flow of your speech for your audience. The goal is that they understand it. Now, it helps not to be too repetitive. You don't want to say it over and over because then obviously the audience isn't going to want to listen quite as much. I recommend for your transition statements to kind of summarize, this was point 1, this is point 2, now we're going to be in point 3. That's a good place to be repetitive. That way we know that you're moving on to a new point, but also kind of remembering exactly what you have covered. Another one in your essays, obviously, if you repeat yourself, your teacher is probably going to highlight that and be like, hey, that's repetitive. In speeches, it is a-okay. In essays, not quite as much. Now, in a speech, you're going to want to be able to naturally reveal your points. With online, it's really hard to do that, but say you're in a face-to-face situation, you will want your speech to flow naturally. You can ask the audience questions and let it kind of pick off what they're asking to learn how you want to organize your speech. You want it to come across more natural because in essay versions, of course, it's going to be more, strategic. It's going to have those headings and those subheadings. It'll be more clear, which is why you really want it to be very obvious in your speech. Hey, this is a main point because many times it can be overlooked. Those are a few tips. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed with your speeches and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to do an outline. What does that look like? What do I need to do? My first tip is, of course, to pick your topic. Hey, You did that. You've picked out your topic. You've picked out your sources. That is a great start. After that, you're going to want to start brainstorming. If you've heard of the bubble cluster, you'll kind of have it written out in the middle, and you'll kind of draw a line and see where it goes. I recommend doing a 5-minute exercise where you just take 5 minutes. If you can get some silence, that is good. And that's where you can just start writing everything you know about that topic, and you can kind of see where it goes. Doesn't matter how it goes, you just write as much as you can. That brainstorming will help you start to think about what you want to research, what you want to take from those sources you have found. And those sources that you picked, if you want to change them for your informative speech next week, that is fine. Just be sure to let me know, hey, I used a different source. That way, when I'm watching your speeches with the outline, I'll see that, hey, that's a little different. Just be sure to let me know. But finding those sources in your topic is a good way to start. That way you can start thinking about what your favorite parts of the research has been. If your topic is about community college, you would think about, okay, I researched and there's these statistics that I thought were good. There's these stories that I thought were good, and you'd start to try to figure out a main point. After that, you'll have a few and you'll try to test it out to see how long it will go. And in that point, you can start to take out irrelevant items, things that maybe don't flow quite as well. Do they take it away from your topic? Think about the audience. Does that distract them from the point of your speech? Is it coming across clear? And here I should have also added, you can remove items, but you can also add. If you start to go, oh, I missed something, that might not flow chronologically. I might want to add a little bit more. This is a good time when you start to put it together to see how it could flow. And in this time, you want to think about your audience and how it's being perceived. Like right now, it's probably going quickly, but I wanted to give you some good tips to help you. And then after that, you're going to want to practice it out loud. That helps you with being able to hear how it flows. As you know, you're only going to hear the speech once. You really want to hear the speech rather than read it. When you read it, it will sound very different in your head than it does out loud, which is why practicing out loud is your best tip for getting ready for your speeches next week. Now this week, it's really important. You can have a rough outline. It's okay, that is fine. A rough outline just to get things started, to show me that you've started to prepare for that speech. Now that speech you have to give is only 4 minutes long, and I will grade the most off of your attention getter, how you start your speech strong. Avoid starting with, hi, my name is, and my topic is. That's good, but definitely put that in your credibility part of your outline. Definitely look at that outline now. But you start strong with a story or humor. Look back at last week and kind of look at the videos. What are some good ways to start your speeches? These are 3 different ways you can outline your speech. Primary is putting the most important information that you found first. That can be helpful. Many times, as we found, attention span is pretty small, and having the most important stuff first can be helpful, but recency is about the most important last. Maybe your audience remembers your last, you're wrapping up a little bit more. These are kind of up to you, how you want to put the information. You won't be graded off on how you outline. Unless one is complex. This one, if you have a complex subject that maybe we don't all know well, definitely start at the beginning. Start at the most simple part of your topic and kind of lead us into it. That way we're able to understand everything. Now I'll share this in the class because it's a lot to read, but this is 5 different ways you can outline your speeches. Kind of gives you an idea of how it can flow. I'll kind of skip over that to help you. But today and this week, it's really step 1. You're really identifying what main points you want to do. You're thinking about what attention getter do I want to use. This can be brief, that's up to you. It's just to get you started. And then with your outline, what I'm basically looking for is you have the attention, the introduction part filled out first, and then at least 3 main points to help reach that 4-minute mark, and that you have 3 sources that are at least an APA. Try. If you can't, it's okay. I understand, but kind of work on that. I'm looking just mostly your attention getter, and that the speech is at least trying to flow in a general direction of your outline, and how you close your speech strong. And then also, this is something I won't grade on too harshly, definitely consider your transition statements. You're going to want them to be smooth. This is from one main point to the next. I should have put it on the little screen, but it's kind of how it's a signpost. Hey, I'm moving on to a new main point. You can do that in a few different ways. And again, I'm talking fast because I only get 15 minutes for you all in this recording session that I do. But it can be, comparing points. You could say, well, I talked about this, and comparedly, it goes with this. You can do something kind of like that, or you can ask questions to your audience. Even if they can't respond, like in our class, it's good to ask questions. That can be helpful. I recommend using this screencast-o-matic that I do, because then you can have the PowerPoint in the back and the webcam is kind of small, and that way you can kind of have some visuals. You can go to the next slide or show a visual, a picture, or a quote, or different things that you want. When you move on from one main point to the other, it's really important that it's obvious to your audience that you are moving on. That helps us pick, okay, we're on to a new topic. I will give a little video in our class on how to do transitions, because that is kind of the most difficult part of the outlines. Is definitely think about that. You don't have to write it out for your rough outline. That's more for you. But for your transitions, it helps to write those out, as you will use the most filler words, those so you will use those the most as you're transitioning from one main point to the next. Having that lined out can be helpful with having a successful speech, which helps me move on to this next slide. If you caught that transition, you will now put it all together, everything we've learned, into the outline. You'll have your attention getter, you will have your main point, any main point you would like, it could be a story, and then your conclusion and sources you had from last week. We're putting it together to hopefully help you start practicing your speeches to get them ready for next week. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you all. I hope you have a wonderful week.